Well, let's roll it then. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, folks. Peggy Simpson is with us. Welcome, Peggy. How is your Saturday going?
It's terrific. And how about you?
I mean, it's a beautiful day. I mean, I can't
It
wait to
is.
get outside and get some sun, though we're socially distancing. I think the sun is more than 6 feet away, so I'm in good shape there.
Yeah, I think so. I
You
think
think?
so. And it is a beautiful, I'm looking out my window here. It's a beautiful blue sky here in St. Louis.
Yes.
And yeah, it's been a great day. We had a great session this morning early on, and looking forward to our conversation today. And then I'm going to do some more research and study. And yeah, just a
Excellent.
great Saturday.
Well, folks, we are launching. We launched last Thursday, and today is the first discussion of a book. Our web series is called Baby Steps, and baby is an acronym for Building a Better You. And if you're just joining us, Peggy and I both picked 3 books each that really have impacted our life, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start with my first book, and let me share my screen here so that you can kind of follow along with what we're doing. And my choice is The Four Agreements. And it's written by Don Miguel Ruiz. And it's a practical guide to personal freedom. And when I was first introduced to this book many years ago, I read it and I forgot about it. And then went through a couple of seminars where they really focused on this, and it became quite powerful. It's a very quick, easy read. The book, as you can see, is relatively thin, but it's so packed full of stuff. And the book begins with kind of a preface to set you up to why you have those 4 agreements. And I just want to mention one piece of what we have here. And it is that your mind dreams 24 hours a day, that the dreaming is the main function of the mind. So even when you're like right now, you may be thinking about something else or something else that's going on, this is all part of that. And the reason for that is because all of us, every one of us, is searching for truth, justice, and beauty. And here's the reason that that happens, is that the way we were raised and the society we were raised in dictates our basic thoughts, our basic values, the way we look at things. Consider this, and he goes into detail this in the book. You did not have any say in what your name was going to be. You don't have any say in what city you were born in. You don't have any say in what school you attended, or what religion you were brought up in, or what church you were brought up in. But all of that together led you to a point in your life where you could begin to make some decisions. So our image of perfection, of what really should be, is one of the main reasons we reject ourselves. And it's also why we don't accept others the way they are. The most important agreements that we can make are those that we make with ourselves. And that's why adopting these 4 personal agreements create the personal empowerment that will allow you to become the person you're destined to become. Before we start into the 4 agreements, Peggy, any thoughts on that and on that one preface of you didn't choose who you are, your name, or anything, or where you grew up or how you grew up?
Yeah, I think that is just critical. I have shared with my kids so many times that, they didn't have choices early on, but as they become of age and they develop their knowledge and their reasoning power, right? At some point they have to pick up and they have to be accountable, and they can choose to drop the baggage if they feel they had some, and they can choose to set their own direction.
Right.
And that's not, there are some that have had some devastating childhoods, and that's not easy to do, but
Right.
it is absolutely, I believe, possible. And I think the point of this author is, with these agreements, is the steps you need to take to go in that direction to change your future.
Okay, let's jump right into it. The very first agreement you make with yourself is to be impeccable with your word. And this is the most important of the four agreements and also the most difficult to honor. Because here's what you do. You speak with integrity. You say only what you mean. You avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. And you use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. You see, your word is the power you have to create and manifest whatever it is you want in your life. One of the reasons that it's almost like a yin yang thing. One of the reasons people love network marketing and people hate network marketing is because it's all based on the word. But that's also what happens when you go out and visit places within your community, a restaurant, or maybe you talk about how, and a good example, Peggy said, well, when you go to this grocery store here, here's how you now have to enter, here's how you now have to exit, be prepared for this, be prepared for that. That is the word. That's also a form of network marketing. So the word then becomes your power, and it's the most powerful tool that we have. It is called the tool of magic. So here's how you really implement the first agreement of being impeccable with your word. It's an affirmation. I am impeccable with my word. Because here's what happens. If you're not impeccable with your word, if you're someone that goes around gossiping, or someone that always tends to find fault with something first, or someone that listens with the intent of responding and not hearing what someone is saying, guess what? Those are the people you're going to attract into your life. It's called the law of attraction. And so you just keep going in this cycle, more or less, a funnel, if you will, like a tornado, and pretty soon you hit ground, and you know what happens when a tornado touches down. That's what happens with your life when you choose not to be impeccable with your word. Peggy, what's coming up with you for this?
Yeah, this is truly absolutely critical, and it takes me back to, again, my faith is one of my core values, and the Bible begins with, in the beginning there was the word, right? That's the very beginning. And your word is so impeccable. And again, I know I use my kids a lot as an analogy, but I have said this to other teams that I have worked with along the way. We do have to be so careful, and we're not always perfect for sure, but we need to be so careful and thoughtful about the words we are saying. And I used to give my kids, when they were small, this activity. I set them at the table, and I gave them each a tube of toothpaste. And I said, now squeeze it out on the table. And so, of course, they had a great time. They squeezed it out on the table and put it all around. And then I said, now put it all back. And their jaws dropped, and they looked at me like I'd lost my mind. And the point of that illustration is the same with our words. Once they're out, you can't take them back. You can't take them back. And, how many times have you had a conversation with somebody where you said, oh, now don't tell anybody I told you this, right? Well, what's the first thing they're going to go do? They're going to go tell someone, more than likely. And then if it comes back around that you said it, you're going to feel bad, right? Because more often than not, if you're telling something that you don't want anybody to share, it's because it's not the most positive statement. So your word is absolutely critical, and it is a conscious effort. You get in disagreements, you get in discussions, political debates, with your friends and your colleagues, and you really have to think first before you put something into a verbal sentence or communication.
Exactly. And I love the analogy you use about the Bible. In the beginning, there was the word. He mentions that in the book, in fact. And when you think about any guiding document out there, those words were chosen for a reason. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, that was purposeful. That was impeccably placed there for a reason. And we're going to learn in a moment how when these four agreements really start to take hold and transpire, that's when you do find a more perfect union that is out there. So I love what you said. I love the analogy of the toothpaste too, because it's right. Once you say something and it's out there, it's out there.
And the same with
And
the written word. The written word
exactly
is
what's
just the
written.
same. Be
That's
careful
right.
what you write and put out there.
Exactly right. And especially with technology today, you might think you delete it. And I would say that Baby Girl from Criminal Minds and Abby from NCIS could find it for us. I mean, there are people that can find it. I don't care if it's TikTok, Snapchat, whatever it is. There's a stamp, a signature stamp placed on that right there that allows them to say, yes, this did happen.
Or someone may have taken a picture of it.
Exactly.
While
Absolutely.
you had it out there.
Screenshot it. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Well, the second agreement goes right hand in hand with impeccable word, and that is don't take anything personally. And this is hard for a lot of people because it is a reflective thing. But you have to really realize that nothing others do is because of you. It might be in reaction to you, but it's not because of you. And what they may say or do is a projection of their own reality and their own dream. And once you become immune to these opinions and actions of others, you're no longer in that victim mentality. In fact, in the book, he calls it a poison that we place up on us. So when he talks about this, that the immunity to this poison is really the gift of this agreement. So how do we make this happen? Realize that what others say is not hurting you. Rather, you have wounds they touch by what they said. Mention that again. They didn't say something that even if it was purposeful, it would not hurt you unless there are wounds. There's something there that you haven't healed that they touch by what they say. So if you live your life without fear, meaning if you love people, if you love yourself, then there's no place for any of these emotions or poison. It's only when we let fear come in that we start to really take things personally. And if you're not familiar, fear is an acronym for false evidence appearing real. And you have two choices with fear. You can face everything and rise, or forget everything and run. And so many times we run. And when we run, that's when we begin to take things personally. The same thing is true if someone keeps telling you how wonderful you are. You know, that's on the opposite side of someone trying to hurt you. When you see others as they are without taking it personally, whether they're telling you you're incredibly wonderful or you've got this issue, when you see it for who they are, you realize that that person can never hurt you. So make it a really strong habit to not take anything personally. And Peggy mentioned this at the top of the call with her kids. And one of the principles she taught them, you are not responsible for the actions of others, but you are accountable for how you react to the actions of others. And that's where not taking anything personally comes in. Peggy, I'm sure you had to deal with this with your kids too.
Well, I did, and I actually had to deal with it with my own life, right? You know, but many who may be watching don't know. I am in a biracial relationship, so my children are biracial, and you know, we've been married for over 30 years, and together over 30 years, and soon be married over 30 years. And so, you know, we had a lot to face, right? This was back in the 80s. And we had to come to grips with the fact that everyone wasn't going to agree. Everyone wasn't going to accept, but it was because they didn't understand, right? They couldn't get past their own prejudices, their own baggage, their own fears. And so we had to decide whether we were okay with that. And when our children did come along, right, I would tell them that, hey, you know, when I was growing up, they made fun of you if you were fat. They made fun of you if you wore glasses, right? They called you four eyes. People find something to be critical of because it helps protect them and it helps them feel better about the fear they have that they don't understand, right? So they keep it at distance. And I told my kids, you know, that they were going to face some prejudices and some comments, and that people, you know, but they couldn't take it personally, that it was that person's problem. And they just happened to be the current realization that that person was looking at for their problem. But tomorrow it would be somebody else. So they couldn't take it personally, not to take it personally, because if they changed out the body, the person would still have their problem. It is their problem. And all you can do is try to be a model and not feed into their problem. Don't take any exception to it. Be kind, you know, kill evil with kindness, and go on about your way, because you have to be strong in who you are.
You hit on two real powerful things there, Peggy. One was when someone does say something to you or about you and you hear about it, you got to remember it's a reflection of who they are and where they're coming from. It is not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of them and where they're coming from. You know, and the other thing is just to rise above it. You know, you've got to know who you are and who you want to become. We'll talk in, I'm sure, in future episodes about what's called your future self, where you see yourself and who that person is. And that's the person that you aspire to be. So looking at that piece of it really makes it come into play there. The third agreement to make with yourself, and this is a hard one for a number of people too, is don't make assumptions. And I love this one. Okay, we're gonna go a little bit past PG rated here. You know what assume means. When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. That's what assume means. So don't make assumptions. You find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want, because it's all about clearly communicating. And this one agreement, probably more than any of the rest of them, can go the furthest in helping to transform your life. Because see, when you make assumptions, you believe those assumptions are true. And that a lot of that comes about from the way in which you were raised and the culture in which you were raised. And I'll give you a good example. Peggy was just talking about being in a biracial marriage. Where I grew up as a kid, it was down in the deep South. And in the deep South, there were only two races, black and white. And if you weren't black, you were white. That was it. And it wasn't until I went off to college and I was in Austin, Texas, which is a real melting pot of the whole world, that I saw prejudices toward Latinos and Mexicans and Spanish people and toward Asian people. And that was just such a rarity for me, because the assumption was, we were taught, if you weren't white, if you weren't black, you were white. Everyone else was white. And that was just like, when I got there, and then I saw a mixture of all these cultures, and then the US became more of a melting pot. And then we had people from all over the world starting to come here. It really opened my eyes up to looking at people for who they are. And I think the one way in which you don't make assumptions, it's a very powerful lesson, but it's also one that I think we ought to forget, and that is to look at the content of someone's character. That defines that person right there for you. Because when you start to make assumptions, then all of the sadness and drama was rooted in making assumptions and in taking something personally. That's when you make assumptions, it's when you start to take it personally. Gossiping is a key element in all of this. It's how we communicate what they call the dream of hell, and we transfer poison one to another. If you're around a gossiper, odds are there's something going on in their life, and they're taking it out on you to make themselves feel better. You know, how often have you heard people say, I just want to hurt someone. I just want to take them down. It's because something is going on in their life. When we don't understand something, that's when we start to make assumptions about the meaning. That's when the power of questioning, asking for clarification. And don't be afraid that it's going to make you sound ignorant or make you sound like you're naive. I just told you, how I was raised. It wasn't until I was 18 years old that I started to see more than a larger culture of people. And I fell in love with this large culture of people. One of the reasons I absolutely love New York City is because it's so eclectic and such a mix of people that you just see all these different variances that come through. When you start to make assumptions, you're going to know that because you need to start justifying everything you do. The only person you justify something to is to yourself. I use this many times in my very favorite quotes. It's what Dr. Seuss taught us. Be who you are, say what you mean, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. It's so powerful. And the real love is in accepting other people the way they are without trying to change them. And I mentioned there was an element agreement at the top of the call that would just transcend anything, and it's this one. Because when you stop making assumptions, when you start asking for clarifications, when you start seeing people for who they are, guess what? The result is no wars, no violence, and no misunderstandings. Peggy, over to you.
Yeah, this one is just, I agree with you. In my opinion, the most critical, right? Because the first one sets the basic foundation. We have to be impeccable with our word. But the second and the third are so closely tied. Making assumptions is just, we all have done it. We all do it. But again, this one requires very conscious thinking when you're communicating with a person. You do not walk in their shoes. You do not know what happened to them just before you saw them. Right. You don't know what's happening to them when they text you. And texting is the worst, right? Texting is the worst because we use cryptic language, and somebody on the other end, we don't know what they're going through in their day. We can't see them. We can't see the look on their face to get validation whether or not they understand. Making assumptions is just disastrous for yourself, right? For yourself, because you can get all the way down the road with a whole bunch of assumptions and hold somebody responsible for something that they never did or never thought. So this one is just, and we do it all the time. It's you and I have caught each other, right?
Right.
And saying, hey, we better not make that assumption. We don't know.
We don't know.
It's one of the things I always try to give, the benefit of the doubt as much as I can. Because again, I'm only accountable for me. Right. I'm only accountable for how I react, how I communicate. I'm responsible for how I communicate. I'm not responsible for the other person. And if I don't understand, I need to try to understand first.
Right. Exactly right. Let's go to the last one because we're running a little short on time, but it's probably the most powerful one. It's not the hardest one, but the most powerful one. And that is to always do your best. Because when you do your best, it allows the other three habits we just talked about to be other agreements to become habits in your life. You cannot make a habit of being impeccable with your word and not taking things personally. And, you can't do any of those without always doing your best. And it's always about doing your best, and no more, no less. But here's the thing about doing your best. Doing your best is going to change from day to day. One day, your very best may be pretty crummy compared to another day, but that's okay. That is your best for that one moment in time. And how do you do it? You live your life intensely. And I want to add to that, you live your life purposefully. Because when you do that, then you know where you're headed with it. Because that's when you begin to take action. You can't take action until you've committed to always doing your best with it. When you try to skate around something that's when you start to then what we call having self-abuse. You start beating yourself up for not being able to accomplish something with, the way you want to. When you do your best, the key to it is don't judge yourself. Critique yourself, look at how you can improve, and realize that if you fail or if something doesn't work, that's okay. You keep going forward with it. As my t-shirt says, you plan your work and you work your plan. And that's how you always do your best. You set it down in motion and you make it happen. If it all goes back to goal settings. And you need to have daily goals, weekly goals, monthly goals, quarterly goals, yearly goals. You need to see a future of where you want to be. Because when you do your best, then when things happen, like what's happening right now with this pandemic, we know better how to react and how to live within a new normal. Peggy.
Yeah. And this one, I would like to add, doesn't mean perfection.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It does not mean perfection. It just means for today's activities, doing the best that you possibly can at doing them as well as you can.
Right.
And once again, I used to tell my kids, I was not a parent that expected straight A's, because straight A's may not be achievable on everything they did. But I did expect them to do their best, right? Do their best. And what did that mean to them? That meant that if you have homework, do your best to try to find the answer. Reread the chapter, ask questions, try it at least, then go to school and ask the next question. But if in a particular subject, the C is the best grade you can get, then be proud of that C, because you did your best. And that's all that you should expect of yourself. Perfection is not achievable, ever.
No.
No one is perfect.
And in fact, when you do that, you're judging yourself, and that's when you start beating yourself up.
That's right. That's right. So yes, I agree that, focusing on this one really will bring the others in play, because if I'm trying to do my best, I'm going to try not to make assumptions. And I'm going to be careful with my words, and I won't, because I'll be focusing on those things, I really won't have time to take things personally. Right.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think I really appreciate you going through this book. I think it's a great book. If people haven't read it, it is a relatively easy read. There's a lot of nuggets, but I thank you for bringing out the highlights in this book. It really is a good reminder. Has been a good reminder for me too.
Absolutely. Let me just mention one more thing, and we're going to skip through a couple of things here. We've talked about that here, but I want to go to one final quote that he gives in the book. And he says, there is really no reason to suffer. The only reason you suffer is you choose to suffer. If you look at your life, you find many excuses to suffer, but a good reason to suffer you will not find. And the same is true for happiness. The only reason you're happy is because you choose to be happy. Happiness is a choice, and so is suffering.
Wow, that's truly powerful. That is, yeah, that's something I think I'm gonna have to print out and put up on my wall, because yeah, that really is huge. Happiness is a choice. No one can make us happy.
That's right.
And
Pharrell Williams does a good job with "Happy," the song. It makes me kind of happy.
Yeah.
So I'll give Pharrell Williams a little bit of credit there. But it's true. Happiness is a choice.
Yep. And it's a much nicer choice for yourself than choosing to suffer and be a victim. But I think if you follow the agreements, happiness will be illogical to follow as well.
I totally agree. Well, Peggy, you've got the next act that we're going to be doing, and it'll be on Tuesday, I believe. You want to tell us about what's coming up on the next one?
I do. On the next one, we're going to talk about John C. Maxwell's book about how successful people think. And we know that our thoughts are the beginning of any results that we're going to get. We think it, we act on it, and we get results, right? And we just then repeat that cycle and tweak it. I think that we'll find that he's got some really good methods, some points that maybe we don't consciously think about.
Right.
So I'm really looking forward to covering that on Tuesday
Mhm.
during our session.
Okay.
And I don't want to reveal too much more about that topic. You'll have to tune back in.
Right. It's going to be Tuesday at 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central. Come back in. John Maxwell is amazing. Just
Yes.
absolutely amazing. And I think what you're going to hear, I've not read the book Peggy's sharing with us. I haven't read it, I should say, in many, many years. But what you're going to find is a lot of your core values and your core principles of how you live and how you should live based right there in that book.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of nuggets that maybe we don't think about very often, but are critical to the thought process.
Right.
So since that's the start of everything, I wanted to start with that book.
Excellent. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. We are going to have a recorded version of this and put it out on YouTube, put it in our feeds for you to share with other people. But come back on Tuesday at 5 Eastern, 4 o'clock Central. We'll see you then. Peggy,
have a terrific Saturday.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.